Hello, I'm Bianca Cotton, your host of Behind the Confident Smile. I am so excited to be here with special guest Jaya Brown today. And we are going to talk about her journey of growing up being an adoptee. So, welcome, Jaya.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you for being here and opening up a page of your life story for us to talk about such a deep and meaningful topic, such as being adopted.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, when you were younger, did you, before you knew you were adopted, did you ever hear about adoption or it talked about in school?
That's a great question. I don't believe that I was familiar with the concept of adoption, prior to finding out that I was adopted. I was so young, or I was an adolescent when I did find out that I was adopted, but prior to that time, no, I don't think I was familiar with it. It's actually a really complex institution, might not be the right word, but it's definitely a meaningful way that families become families or expand their families as well. So I've learned much more about it in the most recent years, but yeah, I wasn't familiar at that time. I don't know many people that even talked about it, friends or family that even talked about it before. I was officially introduced to the concept and its impact on me.
Okay. So when do you remember being embraced by your parents who adopted you? And what I mean by embrace is taken home, even though you didn't know that that's what was happening.
So I have early memories of being with my mom and my dad. And you'll hear me refer to mom and dad. They're the only mom and dad that I've met that I know, but it's my adoptive parents. But I will say I don't have a recollection of this moment, but I recently, in 2018, received my birth records. And in my birth records, I did not realize that part of the packet was going to include my my pre-adoption rather, journey. And one of the moments that sticks out for me is where the social worker indicates that my parents were coming to see me at the foster home for the first time, and we apparently spent hours together. When they returned me to the foster home and I departed from my father, I called him Daddy.
Wow.
And that was the very first meeting with them. And the reason why that is so powerful to me and stuck out for me is because I am such a daddy's girl. And it's very validating and just so special to me to hear that from the moment we met, we had this connection, we had this bond. And I was 23 months when I was adopted. So, I was really young at that point, but something connected us
you all.
right in the beginning. And so I have very grand memories of the bond that me and my father to this day still have. And just the way that he has always shown up as being a very influential figure in my life and in the rest of my siblings' life, because there's more, which I know we'll talk about. There's more of us.
It's many.
Yes, there's many of us.
us.
There's many. But yeah, hugging was a thing in our family. So hugging, I love you was big in our family on one side of the family, right? So I did feel that love and that affection, that appreciation. I felt valued and respected specifically and especially from my father, and then from my grandparents and my aunts. And so when you think about, just like when I think about early memories, beyond just my parents, there's actually other people that are were early examples of love for me.
Beautiful. Beautiful embrace and story. So, with this bond with your father, when did you discover you were adopted, or how did they tell you?
So my dad and I were talking about this around the time when I received my birth records, which I was hesitant over the years to even pursue getting my birth records. So when I received them, there had already been a conversation with my mom and my dad that I was finally going to start this journey officially. And so when I received the records and I talked to my dad, one of the first questions I asked was, when did you all tell me that I was adopted? So my dad says that it was somewhere between age 7 and 12. So I was an adolescent at that point, definitely before I was a preteen, I think. So it was probably more in the 7 to 10 range, I would guess, just because I knew well before I was in middle school, grew up in Tennessee, and so middle school was 7th and 8th grade. I knew well before that point that I was adopted. So he would venture to say it was probably closer to the 7 or 7 to 10 range. But interestingly enough, I don't remember the conversation, but I remember the reason why they told me. And the reason is because when I was adopted, a lot of my first cousins are older than me, way older than me, some 10, 15 years older than me. And so my parents were concerned about someone slipping up and saying it, or just saying it, very not with any intention of being hurtful or anything, but just bringing it up because they were young enough to where, they would still be curious and ask questions and all of that. So that is part of the reason why I learned so early on, according to the conversation that I had with my dad.
Did that change how you felt about your parents?
No, not at that particular time, but I will say, I've always felt this sense of, where do I belong? Where do I fit in? Natural sort of disconnects around identity. But it's interesting, I look a lot like my family. And many people wouldn't know unless we opened up and talked about it. And that's a whole nother conversation where that was, openly talked about, but not necessarily in a positive light. And knowing that it wasn't necessarily always shared in a positive light is honestly what made me feel so, I would say, self-conscious about opening up and talking about being adopted, and not necessarily having those connections to really be able to understand and articulate and really process what it meant to me or how it was affecting me. But my siblings, even to this day, they encourage me to share and talk about my experience as an adoptee. And I was going to say, and you are my sister.
Right.
That is always there. You are my sister. I don't care what anyone says, you are my sister, because that's all we've known, together. And again, when you see us, you'd never know. So it's, God doesn't make mistakes. He always knows what he's doing. And
right. That's your family.
That's my family, right? So.
And so when you talk about the not so positive, experiences, what is one example of a time where it was not a positive experience?
Yeah. So this is the other interesting part of me receiving my birth records, and another data point for me that was very validating. In my records, it talks about the social worker's observations of me and my mother. And there was a disconnect. There was just observations of her maybe pushing me off of her lap, or I'm tiny at that point. I'm young at that point, coming for a visit and seeing that when I got out of the car, I was kind of left at the curb while my mom, hustled towards the door. And again, why that's powerful is because it underscores just kind of the dynamic that I have even to this day with my mom. It is a very complex relationship that has skewed negative. It's skewed hurtful. And, as I continue to process, I work with a therapist that specializes in trauma, which adoption has been defined as a trauma. And so we talk very openly about, just my experiences and such. And so through that, I understand that my mother may not have the capacity to love me in the way that I needed to be loved, and may not have had the capacity or may not have the capacity to process the impact of me not necessarily being her natural born child. And also that me not being her natural born child may not be why I have this experience with her, because over the years I've discovered that all of my siblings and I have a similar experience for different reasons. But one of the situations that came up, me and my brother were speaking, and he talked to me about a really traumatic moment that still stands as one of the most traumatic moments for him when he was maybe 4. And he remembers hearing my mother tell me, "I will send you back." And I remember her saying that to me. I did not realize or remember that my brother was in the room. And my brother said that for him, processing like a mom telling a child, where do you send them back to?
Right.
And at that point, I don't know, I'm certain that there wasn't a discussion around me being adopted. He was so young. It was only the two of us for a little bit. And to this day, that even saying that out loud right now, like it stings to hear, especially me now as a mother, hearing or recalling a mother saying that to a child, and even more so for my brother to have witnessed that. Me and my brother are extremely close and have had this bond for a very long time, and to share such an unfortunate and such a hurtful experience together and not realize it. I
Right.
never realized that. It's literally been just a couple of years that we had this conversation. I never knew this. But that's an example of, it's so dramatically different, the experience that I had with my father and with many of my aunts and with my grandparents and my siblings, as opposed to the experience that I unfortunately have with my mother. So that, like I said, that still stings to this day.
Definitely. Understandably.
Tune in this Friday at 7:30 p.m. on Channel 19 for a candid conversation with Michael Scott Jr.
What's funny is I had thought about running before. I thought that I was ready in 2009. Unfortunately, both of my parents passed in 2009.
Have you ever spoken with your mother about your thoughts and feelings about this situation?
Yes, but it's interesting when I started to talk about what I found in the birth records, and how it just validated the experience that I had growing up. It wasn't received positively, and there was an intent to shift the narrative and change the narrative from what was right on the paper, and also from the actual lived experience that I have had. And so it was not productive, and my decision and requirement rather, was that we could only have this conversation with a third party, meaning a therapist, some sort of mediator, and that wasn't received well. So to this day, we actually are not on speaking terms.
Wow.
She opted to close the door. And that's hard.
Yeah.
On the one side of it, it has been such a blessing to not have the toxicity that exists in our relationship. So I wouldn't change the fact that there's been a break from that. It has been eye-opening for me. It has helped me, again, through the work that I'm doing in therapy as well, through the supportive village that I have made up of friends and family, and this includes my father and my siblings and my aunts as well. It's made me realize what I deserve and how I deserve to be treated, and also that some people do not have the capacity to love you, to receive you, to appreciate you in the ways that you deserve. And I think I needed that time, or I have and continue to need that time to really understand it. Because when you are an individual that doesn't necessarily, is not rooted, is not rooted in something. When roots,
It can be instability.
the instability,
Yeah.
right? Instability in your self-confidence, instability in who you are, instability in whether or not you are enough for other people. And that is something that has, it started very early on, because what I had to understand is I was struggling with this dynamic of an experience that I had was that my mom would say that I was left in a trash can. Well, that wasn't true when I got my records, but I'm a grown-up finding this out.
So this was the narrative
My whole life.
childhood, teenagehood, young
Right.
adulthood.
I wasn't wanted. I was thrown out, right? So obviously that's very much that shapes you a lot. That is something that I have had to unpack and unpack and also box it up and leave it somewhere else. Get it up out of my
Right.
my energy and my space. And it's something that I continuously work through, but I also think that I needed the time that I have had over the course of these, I think we're approaching 4 years now,
Wow.
to really be able to productively unpack that and to reflect and just be able to do the work so that, we talk about generational curses.
Yes.
Right? Like, I don't want
To pass that
to
down
pass
to
it,
your
no.
daughters.
And I have 2 now. And it was my husband and I talked about this. Like, he remembers how concerned I was about the thought of being a mother to a daughter,
Right.
because I didn't want that same dynamic. And he would often encourage me to say, whatever we have, this is before kids even came into the picture, you won't have that same dynamic because you're doing the work.
Right.
And you also understand how your experience growing up has made you feel. And I've had this same conversation with my siblings as well. We are so focused on making sure that our experience, the positive things, are passed along, and we create new experiences and memories for our children, and we learn from the experiences that were not so positive, but maybe necessary to shape who we are. I don't know. They've absolutely shaped who we are,
Right.
or who we've become, who we are becoming. But it's complex. I say, like, adoption. I'm been blessed to start connecting with other adoptees, and though our experiences are not identical, there's a lot of similarities, and there's two things can be true at one time. There's the blessing of it. There's also the trauma of it, and you have to work through both sides of it. And like I said, for me, it's how do I continue to do the work on myself so that I can just be better for my daughters and other people around me, other adoptees.
Right.
So.
Wow. First, I want to say thank you for opening up more pages of your book, and sorry to hear about your experience specifically with your mom. Mothers have the power and force and influence to pull on the heartstrings of our children,
We
right?
do.
We know that. We know. Well, some people may know it, some people may not, but also in us understanding that our mothers are complex humans too, and not giving any excuse to treatment. Not at all. That's not what
Absolutely.
I'm sharing, but I know in my own journey, understanding my parents' history, their journey, helped me understand what I saw.
Exactly.
And not everyone has that opportunity to have those open conversations. And I'm so happy that you are intentional about doing the work, building community with other adoptees, and saying, this is the conundrum that I live in. This is the complexity of my life. But what I've made a decision to do is to show up for my daughters
Right.
in the best light as I continue to do the work. That's powerful.
Thank you.
I'm proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm honestly, I'm proud of myself, as well. And I feel compelled to be that voice and that advocate and that champion for other adoptees, because I didn't see that growing up. I didn't have that growing up. So I want to be that resource, and even whether, if it's folks considering adoption or, folks considering giving up children for adoption. Like, it's kind of like that trifecta, if you will. I mean, there's multiple sort of angles to it and multiple people that are part of the journey and part of the process. And I think it's important that we share these experiences so that we can not only heal, because this is
Right.
very healing. Like being able to talk about this, I'm finding is very healing for me. But also, it could bless or help someone else that might think, like I did for so long, it's me. I'm the only one having this experience. I'm not.
No.
I'm not. My experience is my experience, and it, like I said, it may look different from someone else's experience, but it's still, there's elements of it that could still, just impact someone else. I know I learned from others that I've spoken to that are sort of part of that trifecta. Even again, sharing experiences with my siblings and how it felt growing up in a home where they would hear certain things like this, or where, we were growing up together as siblings.
Right.
It's important for all of us to sort of understand what the other's perspective is. So
Definitely. And especially since you were the only adopted
was.
and the other siblings were
Yes.
natural born. And I want to say that in itself is a whole conversation, right? But we will have to have that conversation at another time. And I thank you for sharing your journey to being adopted, how you found out, why you found out, the dynamics in your household, and really breaking that box and stigma of what happens in this house stays in this house. We keep our stories to ourselves and suffer in silence. You are breaking that. So thank you for your courage today.
Thank you. Thank you for the space to heal. Thank you.
My pleasure. Well, you all, I don't know what else to say. There is so much richness in this conversation to sit with. So I hope that if you know someone who is adopted or have adopted or thinking of adoption, please share this episode with them. Take care.